This is Paul Glumaz once again. Today is the 27th of February, and this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. And today is the day that Michael Cohen claims that Donald Trump is a criminal, a con man, and a cheat. And my response to him is, that's a hell of a lot better than what we had before. That's my attitude. That's not a good attitude, but that's my attitude. Screw him. You know, I mean Donald Trump, he's you know, he's completely upset the institutional structures of the United States and the world, and they're like beside themselves, and they're going crazy. They're going crazy. This thing today with Michael Cohen, I wouldn't watch it because I didn't want to hear. I heard part of it, and I just said I'm not watching the rest of it. I know what's going to be said, but this is happening on a very big day when probably by the time you watch this, the United States will have signed an end of the Korean War agreement with the North Koreans. That's huge. But no, it's Donald Trump is a criminal. He's a con man. He's a cheat. And he needs to be impeached for that, for being a criminal, for being a con man and a cheat. So this spectacle is one spectacle, and there are other spectacles as well. And what I want to say is that all policy coming from the British establishment, from the deep state in the U.S. and everywhere in the world that's connected to this, has one vector right now, and that's to box in Donald Trump. He is threatening to work with China and Russia, and also India could be coming in as well. This is what the LaRouche movement has been fighting for since the middle 90s, a four-power coming together to eliminate the British Empire, reorganize the world's financial system, and get the humanity going in the right direction. This is what we're going now on 20-some years, 25 years, 24 years of this, of our initially saying that this is what we needed, a four-power agreement. We're close to it. There is an article in the Washington Times, I believe. Les Dozansky, he's now talking about that. And it's coming. This whole idea of the United States coming into an agreement with the other three major powers is on the horizon now. That's what the North Korea discussion is all about. That's really ultimately what the trade negotiations are all about. It's not about trade. The trade negotiations that Trump is having with Xi Jinping with China is not about trade per se. It's about the fact that the financial powers, the British system, set up these rules through the speculative financial system, through the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, through things like NAFTA, which operated to the disadvantage of the industrialized world by sending jobs to where there's cheaper labor, rather than sending development capital goods to develop these countries and allow them to raise the standard of living of their populations and the value of their labor force as the more developed countries become more developed. That's what Kennedy would have done. That's what FDR was oriented towards. And this is the key to understanding the current situation, because what Trump is trying to do is in this trade agreement with China, he's trying to restore the industrial America, the industrial nation, and put our people that have been displaced back to work and begin training the next generation of skilled labor. So all these jobs went to China, and China. It's the only way China could get foreign exchange to be able to buy the things that they needed to develop China. But China allowed its economy to be used in this way, but they never allowed the financial system to come in and take over. So ultimately, China came out ahead because they used the foreign exchange, and they used their own internal credit system to launch an industrial transformation, which brought 700 million people out of poverty. And now everyone's blaming China. Oh, the jobs went to China. Trump isn't blaming China. He says that. He's blaming the previous leadership of this nation for conforming to that system of the international rules-based system of the World Trade Organization, General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, and so forth and so on. So he's busting out of that. And what's being negotiated between China and the United States is an agreement which will benefit the development of the United States and China both, but which is outside the international rules-based system. Rather, it's an agreement, it's a bilateral agreement between the two most economically powerful countries. And that bilateral agreement, however it works out, is a stab in the back of the system. It's a different system. It's a different system. It's the United States as a sovereign nation making an agreement with another sovereign nation, China. That is why they're freaked out about Donald Trump, because that sets a pattern for other nations to do that. And that sets a pattern then for nations agreeing to a new system, a new agreement that actually makes it easier for them to trade and develop, which would be a new Bretton Woods, a new agreement among nations, which is what LaRouche has been proposing. And so this is really why they're doing Michael Cohen on the same day that the Korean situation is in the process of being resolved, because this is serious. This is a serious threat to the system. The very trade deal negotiated with China is a threat to the system. Okay, so everything's being pulled. Terrorist bombing in Kashmir to get India and Pakistan going at each other, which then pits India against China. That's not working. Then the Venezuela situation. All these neocons and have surfaced, from the good old Iran-Contra days, and these, Cubans that hate Castro worse than the lost cause of the Confederacy. They lost their influence, to the ex-slaves. Cuba was a slave country. People don't realize Cuba was a place where they had the slave trade, and the slaves rebelled, and with Castro represented a slave rebellion, and the upper crust of Cuba, the non-slave part, said, well, this is not our Cuba anymore. We got to go to Miami, and they built up this thing about Cuba, and it's so permeated this layer, like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Iran-Contra guy who actually got convicted on a felony on that, Elliot Abrams, he's been put in charge of this whole thing. Mike Pence, Pompeo, Bolton, they're all going nuts about Venezuela. And, well, Venezuela Hey, it's a socialist country. Yeah, it's a socialism is dead. Communism is dead. It died. The Chinese aren't communists. Well, they have a communist party, but they're not communists anymore. They went, they went in a different direction. The Russians gave up communism totally. Putin is more conservative than these guys are, and so these guys are like worse than Don Quixote. I mean, they're like living in a different world of the past, of the Cold War, of kill a commie for mommy and all of that. I mean, they're like, the military-industrial complex needs some reason to exist. It needs terrorism. It needs to. Under Obama, that we were running under the radar. We were running war all over Africa, all over everywhere. The United States was running military operations everywhere against so-called terrorists, against so-called governments that were not agreeable to whatever, and this was all being done mostly covertly, and all of this is being challenged by Donald Trump, and these guys are like looking for a reason to exist, and now there's Venezuela, which has been in the planning for a long time, and they're now saying, yes, we must, have freedom in Venezuela, and then we got to have freedom in Nicaragua, and then we got to have freedom in Cuba. Why? Because China is our great enemy, and they're working with China. We don't want China to come in and take over Latin America with the Belt and Road. That's what they're saying. Is Trump saying that? No, they're saying it. So all these guys are out there, swinging at the communists, at Chavez, but at Chavez and Maduro But what? Chavez wasn't any good. You know why Chavez was no good? Because he carried out the bankers' program. He won the election in '98, and he instituted his system, and they carried out the they didn't develop. Why didn't they develop? Because they did everything the bankers told them. They were a pawn of the British. Now, they did use some of their oil money to provide services for their people, so they have some support among the poor. But they didn't take Venezuela out of the condition of poverty and what have you. They didn't do that. But so what? So what? That's not the issue. The issue is how do you undermine what Trump is doing? How do you set this thing on fire and that thing on fire and this thing and that thing on fire? How do you create all kinds of issues? How do you create all kinds of problems? Now take this Green New Deal, or the New Green Deal, or whatever they call it. It's totally insane. Because, first of all, if you shut down coal and fossil fuels and try to go to wind and solar, you don't have enough energy density in solar and wind to really maintain an industrial nation. This is what Germany is now. It's a crisis in Germany. They're getting rid of nuclear power. They're ending coal, so they got to import all this energy. All this, and the electricity prices have tripled. The population doesn't like that. And then they're being told by Pence that they got to shut down the Nord Stream 2 for the natural gas, and if they can't get any Russian natural gas, then Germany doesn't exist. So our vice president at the Munich security conference is told the Germans, hey, you don't have to exist. We don't care if you don't exist. But we don't want Russian natural gas to come to Germany outside of Ukraine. This is nuts. These people are nuts. These people like they're completely nuts. And they why is Trump tolerating them? Because the neoliberals are worse. They're nuts, And the neoliberals are even more nuts. And this uh, this new Green Deal shuts down the economy. And then they have the gall to say we're going to all have free medicine and free everything, and we're going to have high wages. There's no way. You do that, you can't. But there's no conception of an economic reality in that new Green Deal. So why are they doing it? Can't everyone see that that's the case? Anybody who's a skilled worker can see that. Anybody who's got any experience in the real economy about how much energy it takes to produce some steel or some aluminum, or how much energy it takes, it's insane. And yet, this is what they're pushing. Why? Because it doesn't work. They're pushing it because it doesn't work. And therefore, it screws up totally the ability of Trump to work with the saner Democrats to have an infrastructure program. It totally screws everything up because now you have this environment where if you're a Democrat and you don't agree with it, if you go public, you're going to get pounded. And so it's this kind of environment. And then the Michael Cohen environment is another environment. So you get this environment, this atmospheric environment, which makes it very hard for Congress to function and collaborate with the president. So, and then you have the neocons in the Republican side going off on Venezuela. Man, the whole thing is huge. It's a huge mess. But why are they doing this? Because they can't allow Trump to actually pursue an America, a Make America Great Again. Because to make America great again, you got to work with China and Russia and India. You got to work on global development. That's the only way you're going to make America great again. You cannot make America great again unless you revive an advanced industrial economy for the United States. And you can't do that under the existing financial system unless you create a new financial system, a new Bretton Woods type system. And you can't do that unless you have a relationship with Russia, China, especially, and also India should be coming into that as well. And that's all potentially there. Because this Korean thing gets resolved, it's the end of that part of the world being controlled by geopolitics, where the North Korean situation was the basis for pitting Japan and South Korea against Russia and China. Now that's changed. It's China cooperating with Russia, influencing North Korea, and Japan is being brought in, and South Korea is being brought in, and that's why North Korea is willing to actually work out an agreement with the United States to eventually eliminate its nuclear program, because the nuclear program doesn't do them any good, but they want guarantees that they're not going to be overthrown. They want a guarantee that they're not going to be destroyed once they give up the nuclear weapon. And who's giving them the guarantees? Well, besides Donald Trump, it's going to be Russia and China. So if all of a sudden these neocons decide to launch an assault on a defenseless North Korea, then they're going to have to deal with Russia and China. So that's that's sort of the situation. The same thing is potential in the Middle East. As they start to clean up the terrorists, you can start to have these kind of perspective where China, Russia, the United States, India. Now, Kushner, the son-in-law, is on a peace mission in the Middle East. And what's it based on? It's based on developing nuclear power for the Middle East. The oil doesn't do anything. The oil's there. You export it, you get money, but you're not developing that area because of all the conflicts and what have you. If you build nuclear power plants throughout the Middle East, you have the ability to do a lot of development. So this is a key. This is key. So Jared is there talking about nuclear power, and now also before him in the original earlier, that was what um, Michael Flynn was talking about, was using nuclear power to develop the Middle East as a way of bringing in stability to the area. So all of this is going on, and there's tremendous potential. But this system of globalization and population reduction and cheap labor and permanent war, permanent peace, permanent instability and global financial speculation, that system does not want to go away, and they're going to fight, and the fight is on, and it's going to get more. You're going to see more fights. You're going to see more rabid psychotic expressions of anti-Trumpness in the media. And the more they do that, the more they're going to turn people off. The more psychotic portions of the population they're going to become. So this is only the beginning, folks. This is only the beginning of a process that will probably lead into the general election a year and a half from now. So that's what we're looking at. And but what people don't understand is that, you can call Donald Trump a racist all you want, but for the African American, they don't care if he's a racist or not. Most white people, as far as they're concerned, are racist anyhow, regardless. What they care about is whether there's jobs, whether there's an actual ability to have a decent living standard. That's what African Americans are going to, and Hispanic Americans and other Americans, white Americans. That's how they're going to judge Trump. They're not going to judge Trump on which mistress he paid off or who he lied to, or maybe he was a little shady in some of his questionable practices in his business. They're not going to look at him for that. You're going to see the results. Are you going to really rebuild this country or not? And that's what these liberals don't understand. That's what they do not understand. That's the metric that will determine the future, not this mudslinging. All the mudslinging in the world means nothing if you don't have a job. But if you do get a job and your life starts to improve, then all the mudslinging in the world isn't going to make a difference. You're not going to go against that. So this is really the issue fundamentally. And I think the potential is incredible. The potential exists, which is why all vectors are to box Trump in, to prevent him from being able to do that, to prevent him from being able to deliver the jobs, to prevent him from being able to work with Russia and China. Everything is vectored in that, both from inside the administration, from outside the administration, to hotspots being orchestrated all over the world. It's all being coordinated as from that standpoint, but it's all short term. You have Pence, Pompeo, Abrams, all these people organizing for a coalition of the willing for a military invasion. And the entire Lima group, which initially recognized Guido, saying no military intervention. The European Union says no military intervention. And now finally Abrams at the United Nations said they had to say no military intervention because probably that's Trump's position. Yet they went on a psychotic tirade about communism and everything under the sun. But so how are they going to overthrow Maduro? Well, they're going to use irregular forces, covert operations, this and that. But so far, no one's defecting. No one significant is defecting from the military or the cabinet or what have you. So this thing is looking more and more like a bunch of people screaming for something that isn't going to happen. And it's going to make them look really bad if it doesn't happen. Pompeo and Bolton and Pence, they can scream all they want. But if it doesn't happen and they don't succeed in getting Maduro out and causing chaos in Venezuela, then people will be less scared of them in the future, right? They'll be less scared of these kind of characters. So this is a very wild situation. So there's a lot of changes going on. Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, went to Pakistan, India, and China, and he signed all kinds of economic agreements with these countries. So what is that all about? And he's saying that he wants to be part of the Belt and Road. Well, what is that all about? And that Vision 2030, which is the modernization vision of Saudi Arabia, is coherent with the Belt and Road. But the Saudis are still in Yemen, and they're being, they're carrying out mass genocide at the same time. But if you go to Vladimir Putin's speech before the State of the Nation speech, and you look at the economic part in the beginning, what's he calling for? He's calling for the development of the productive powers of labor of the population. That's what he's calling for. That's LaRouche. How do you, through infrastructure, scientific and technological development, and manufacturing, creating the basis for improving the productive powers of the labor force. Well, what's Trump trying to do? What's China's Belt and Road? That's LaRouche. And LaRouche, who passed away on the 12th of this month, on the 12th of February, this is his legacy. And it's active in the world now. There is a change in the way of thinking, not this green stuff, but this idea of developing the productive powers of the workforce, so that one person can produce for many through an elaborated, modern, scientific and technological system. And that is Hamilton. That is LaRouche. That is where most of the world, in Asia and Russia, this is where they're going. And that's what we need to go to. We need to end this British experiment in deindustrialization.